the Chitimacha tribe of Louisiana is actually still on a section of their land, original homeland. So proud of that. We are very excited to have everybody joining us tonight and kicking off this webinar. The Americas Award is a project, as Denise was saying, of the Consortium of Latin American Studies called nicknamed CLASP. It was created in 1993 to encourage and commend authors of children's and young adult books that portray Latin American, Caribbean, Latinos in the United States, and to provide teachers with recommendations for books for classroom use. The awards are administered by both Tulane and Vanderbilt's Consortium of Latin American Studies, and also generously supported by a number of universities. Get these right here. From Florida International University, Stanford, the Ohio State University, UNC Duke, Consortium of Latin American Korean Studies, University of Florida, University of New Mexico, University of Texas at Austin, University of Utah, and the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. And we do thank Scholastic for submitting The Moon Within for consideration for the award, which we all the committee members fell in love with. So I'm really, really pleased to welcome Aida Salazar, award-winning author, coming to us from Oakland. She has an MFA in writing from the California Institute of the Arts, has performed at cultural centers, cafes, alternate art spaces, and universities throughout the Southwest and Latin America. She's taught visual art, fiction to students of all ages, as I understand. She's a founding member of Las Musas, which is I would love to hear more about this organization, the first collective of debut Latinx authors in US children's literature. She's also produced festivals and events and is just an all-around, I guess say writer activist, is that a fair term? And by way of starting our conversation, I would just like to welcome Aida to give us a reading from The Moon Within. I'll turn it over to you, Aida.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Pat, and for everybody who's the committee who read my book, who loved it. I'm so grateful for this opportunity to be here with you today. Let me see. Let me get the gallery view. Oh, there we go. That's much better. I wanted to see everybody. I had it on speaker view, but I'm going to read. Oh, I should say that I am on Ohlone land. Thank you so much for that land acknowledgement. It's really an important thing for me. And so I'm in Oakland, California on Ohlone land. All right. So I'm going to read from the beginning of The Moon Within, which is a novel in verse. And if you don't know what that is, a novel in verse is a book told through a series of poems. And so each of these poems has a title. And this first one is My Locket. There is a locket in my heart that holds all of the questions that do cartwheels in my mind and gurgle up to the top of my brain like root beer fizz. Questions that my journal doesn't keep, so my little brother Juju or other Snoops don't read them. Questions that Mima knows how to answer, but I'm too embarrassed to ask her because they might seem stupid or gross or wrong. Like, why have my armpits begun to smell? Or how big will my breasts grow? Or when exactly will my period come? I flush bright red right through my amber skin just thinking about it. It was so long ago that Mima was 11. Maybe she wouldn't remember what it's like. Maybe she'll make me talk about it a lot. Maybe wind herself into a lecture about the beauty of women's bodies that I don't want to hear from her sometimes cactus lips. Maybe she'll think I'm delirious and say, Sally, are you running a fever? While she kisses my forehead. My locket also keeps secrets. Secrets tangle in the shyness of my tongue, even when I try to tell them to my best friend Magda. Instead, my locket holds quiet my crush on Ivan, who is 1 year older than me and who can do a backflip better than the other boys in his capoeira class. Or the wish that Aurora, my friend, would just go away and not have a crush on him too. or how often I sneak the tablet from my parents when I'm supposed to be practicing music or dancing. Though I've never seen it, I know my locket is there. It keeps my questions, my secrets, warm, unanswered, and safe. Luna. A beam of moonlight squeezes through my window's curtain. Luna is out tonight. My eyes wide open like doors. I'll be 12 in a few months. I should be allowed to go to sleep later than 7-year-old Juju, who shares a room with me. But I'm not. No matter that it is Saturday. Round-cheeked Juju passes out the moment his head hits the pillow. And I stare at the May moonlight. I watch her light up a sliver of dust in my room, like a performance. Small specks dance, twirl, bounce, float, glide, somersault. They dance like I do. I try to memorize their choreography to use during bomba dance class when Magda drums for me, and I'm free to improvise. I smile to think that specks of dust dance around me, though I don't hear music. Maybe they dance to the clicks and creaks of our little house in Oakland and the city crickets and Mima and Papi's footsteps outside my door, Juju's steady breathing. And when Luna is gone and I can't see their floating, I know they continue to dance in a dream with Luna and me. Moon ceremony. Mima says, judging by my body, that soon my moon will come, and with it, my moon ceremony. It's a period, Mima, I tell her, not a moon. She whips back. It will come every 29 days, just like the moon, so it's a moon cycle. She doesn't know that the moon is a dancer to me, not a period. I dread the ceremony where she will gather all 6 of my tias, some of my dance teachers, a constellation of grown-up women to talk to me about what it means to bleed monthly. And worse, I'll have to openly share my body secret, my locket secret, as if on display like a ripe mango on a fruit stand. I just about lose my lunch and I can't roll my eyes back into my head anymore. Mima tosses her long night black hair to the side to explain for the 20th time, while I turn my back and imitate her words. Our ancestors honored our flowering in this way. It's a ritual taken away from us during so many conquests. The thought of having to talk to anyone, especially adults, about secrets only meant for my locket makes my insides crumble. I won't do it. Please, Mima, please don't make me do it. Embarrassment will eat me up whole, I shout from my heart. Don't worry, Sally, she calms. Your body will tell us when it is time. Poor Sally. I feel so bad for her. A closet full. Monday morning before school, I can't change in our only bathroom. Mima's in there. So I squeeze into the closet to hide from Juju. Bobby comes in to call me for the breakfast he always makes, but I stay quiet, cool. I think I've escaped, but soon Mima comes looking and opens the door. Ay, mija, I love it, she screams for the whole house to hear. I clutch at the new bra she bought me, roller coaster twisted onto my chest. The straps are tangled. Let me fix it. Shh, Mima, I whisper hard. As she untangles, she calls for Papi. Amor, come see how well this bra fits Sally. She shakes her head like she doesn't believe it. It's amazing. Just look at this muchachita. Está floreciendo. I hear Juju and Papi's steps approach. Their footfalls are growing heated, pounding in my head. I contort into a pretzel inside that shrinking closet. Mima, no. Quieta. There's nothing to be ashamed of, Sally. It's cause for celebration. What's a celebration? Papi asks. Breasts. Our girl is growing breasts. Mima's high pitch sears my ears. Awesome, Juju chimes in. When I'm 11, will I grow some too? Shut up, you little, I strike. Sally, Papi warns, but then turns to Juju. It isn't likely, mijo. They're mammary glands designed to nurse young. Remember, like the mama goats we saw? You mean like goat teats? Juju cracks up, lets out his annoyingly loud goat bleat. Bleh! Sally's got teats! My skin swells with an out-of-control fire. Mima! I cry as helpless as ash. She hugs me so tight and kisses me all over my sizzling face and head. I'm just so thrilled for you, Sally. It really is a marvelous moment. I jerk away and turn my back on all three of them. Slip on my top, wishing to disappear into a flame. When I turn around, Mima's got tears in her eyes. Vamos, Papi hugs and nudges her and Juju away. Let's give Sally some privacy. I burst from that cramped space, breathing a burning anger in and out of my lungs. My fiery eyes land on the picture of my family and me in front of my 11th birthday cake. And I take scissors to their smiling faces and mine until we are in a million pieces like my locket. Poor Sally. This is the moment when we meet her best friend, my best echo. Magda is better than my best friend. Strange maybe because we aren't anything alike. I wear my curly hair cola de caballo long or pulled back in a bun and love the flowering cotton skirts girls have to wear to dance bomba. She wears her bright brown hair short, t-shirts, jeans, high-top Vans, skater boy style, and hardly dances. She only drums. She is a smaller 11-year-old than others, maybe because her growing hasn't kicked in yet. But the power in her hands is so big, the sound bounces off the drum, fills the room, and sinks into your bones. She's by far the best drummer in our bomba performance group, Farolitos, and the best at smiling. Magda knows how to work up the crowd at shows with a quick flash of her wide white teeth. I think I dance the best when she drums. When I make a move and mark it with my twirling skirt, a piquete. She hits the drum right at that moment, like an echo, but better, because it's as if she can read my mind and finds my next move before I do. She is my best echo. Boyness. Before our last performance a couple of weeks ago, Magda waited for one of the bathroom stalls to be free. Auburn-haired Aurora says, "You can't really be in the girls' bathroom." Magda chuckles back, "Of course I can. I'm a girl." She knew what Aurora was hinting at because others have often asked about how much boyness she had versus girlness. Mima was in the bathroom too, brushing my hair into a tight bun that stretched my eyes like rubber bands, and we quietly looked on. Aurora raised her screechy voice and blurted, "My mom says you hate yourself and that's why you want to be a boy." Magda flushed red to the tips of her ears. She turned her back to Aurora, rubbed her hands in her face as if to stop tears from coming. All of us stood silenced in shock. "Wait a minute, Aurora." Mima lets my hair go and marches over to the girls. "Magda has more love for herself than any of us. She knows herself so well she can be anyone she wants. And you can tell your mommy I said that." It was a good thing Mima was there. Thoughts stalled in my mind like a broken down car, but my uneasy thoughts wanted to drive off and think of happy things, like how fun it is for Magda and me to learn to ride skateboards, hold our tongues so that normal words sound like bad words, or play echo when we perform. Magda smiled big, grabbed Aurora and hugged her with one arm, gave her a little nudge on the head as if to say, "You booger, knock it off." Poor Magda. I'm going to end with this next poem. It's a little bit further into the story. It's called Tulips in the Mirror. After school, I dread getting in the shower. I fight with Mima right before I get in here. Don't need it, don't want to, feel too lazy. But then the warm water falls on my body. I escape to the land of lather. I never want to leave. This is where bubbles make my new body disappear, and I have my old one back, where I don't have fur like hair growing on my legs or two tulip bulbs on my chest, and my curly hair is not poofy. It is slick and long like a sirena's. Mima has to come into the bathroom to get me out. Be mindful of the drought, mija. I climb out of the tub and dry myself off. I catch my reflection in the mirror, and I can't pretend anymore. There they are, the fuzzy hair, the tulip breasts, my growing thighs. Mima says I'm flowering early, and it's true. My body's on the way to look like hers, blooming like a flower I don't want to be. I hope that gave you a little bit of
Ah,
the.
I always just love hearing authors read their work. It just, I mean, we bring it to life ourselves. And of course, this is a book that I've read a lot out loud myself just because I want to hear it. But it was so, so beautiful. As everybody's been introduced to this, this may seem an odd question to begin with, but I know that Kirkus has alluded to this as the successor to Are You God? There It's Me, Margaret. And I just wondered how you felt about that comparison, because obviously that's pretty clear to the audience here today.
Well, actually, that has had some layers. Of course, I read Judy Blume when I was a little girl, and it was the book that we kind of snuck around, and passed to one another. And and so I'm a big fan of Judy Blume. I've watched her read and lecture, and it's just a big fan. But I think it's considerably different.
It
It's
is.
considerably different in that you know the the Moon Within. I didn't know it at the time, but I didn't know that it was breaking ground in the Latinx community, in Latinx literature in particular. That we'd never had a story about menstruation ever, in middle grade fiction. We'd never had a gender fluid character presented in middle grade fiction. We'd never even discussed, indigenous rooted ceremonies in middle grade fiction in Latinx, um, from the Latinx literary canon. And so there were a lot of things, and then in the wider realm, we never saw a girl talk about her vulva, and that and I didn't read this poem. It's called Mi Flower, Mi Flor. I thought about it, but I thought, well, maybe not. But those are all first that I didn't know that I was writing until after the fact. And so at first that was like a really an honor. I couldn't believe it, like how that comparison could even be made. But then I realized, like, I was really trying to do something very different than what I think Judy Blume was trying to say. I was trying to not break, but open up conversations that our community had not really had.
We always are interested in the backstory of where the ideas came from, where that book started. And did you know from the very beginning, when you began to write this book, or you got the idea for this book, that you were going to combine those issues of a girl's coming of age and coming into her own and menstruating with the gender fluid character? Did you know that from the outset?
I sort of did, yeah, because The Moon Within was based on my life. I live in Northern California, in the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area, that has a really rich cultural landscape. And also because folks are a little more progressive here, we've witnessed many children be welcomed through ceremony into their true gender, and so that wasn't really kind of outside of the realm of possibility. And in fact, the girl was really modeled after my daughter, who was Mexican, Afro Puerto Rican Mexican, and and one of her bomba performance buddies who was gender fluid. And so it really, I didn't have to look very far, there it was. And of course, all of what happened is fictionalized. My daughter was raised, or I raised her to accept ceremony, especially around the moon, to sit in circle with other women, to honor her body, to have a relationship to the universe and our internal cycles. And so she was really looking forward to her moon ceremony, and I thought it would be interesting to kind of flip that and make it the opposite. So it was really part and parcel of it, because the landscape was that way, the cultural landscape, and then the emotional and friend landscape was that way too.
Yeah, in some ways, though, as a writer, isn't it hard when you have an awful lot of your life based in your book to then twist it around and do something different for the good of the story? That's always
Yeah,
interesting.
I didn't have too much trouble. It was kind of liberating because, I could say, my daughter didn't have to say, well,
It's
yeah,
not
that's
really her.
me. Yeah, that really didn't happen to me, right? Yeah, so.
Yeah. Now, I would say that the fact that you pronounce it Selly, is that
Hmm.
correct? Selly?
Hmm.
Um, that Selly is so resistant to this moon ceremony. She doesn't want to. And there's that line in that first poem, I think it's the first poem, where she says, I know my locket is there. It keeps my questions, my secrets warm, unanswered, and safe. And, usually when you think about teenagers, they have questions and they want them answered, but not this one, not
Hmm.
this one. So she's very resistant, but the mother is insistent. Um, and there's, yeah, go ahead.
No, I just, the mother, of course, is one aspect of me. I call myself a guerrilla herbalist, because I practice, I have a relationship to herbs. And then, of course, all of the wisdom that I've gained as an adult, came is reflected in Sally's mom, but she's like super heavy-handed. I'm not that heavy-handed. I hope not, but I wasn't that way with my daughter. But again, for the sake of the story, for the sake of conflict, I made her really kind of an intense person.
But on the other hand, what you're
Mhm.
so fluidly able to do here is in that moon ceremony poem that you read,
Mhm.
when Celia expresses her distress, and then the mother just brings it around to also her awakening of called social justice, because it's like she's saying this is a ritual taken away from us during the conquest, during the colonizing. And I thought that was just really, really just a rich way to approach.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, that was, I think these are parts of the difference between Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret, and this book, that there's this kind of decolonial uh un, you know through line and or subtext, that runs through it, that's really talking about how people are, who have been colonized, in this case, this Afro Puerto Rican Mexican girl, she comes from colonized people, but reclaiming these ceremonies that have been erased and taken from us is a way of healing from colonialism, in the way that, like, Ansaldúa says that we must do.
Mhm. But children have to be brought into that, because there's
Mhm.
the book is so full of just middle school angst, and it's every kid's problem. I mean, it's like their battle over devices and the sibling rivalry and the burgeoning first crush and the friend breakup with Magda, and so all that stuff is there, and it's all just what's present and matters to a kid, and yet she's brought very slowly into this, hey, this is important. And I think she arises to that awareness, which is lovely. One of the criteria for the Americas Award is that a book convey the culture, because a lot of times a book will be written by a Latinx person, but it doesn't really reflect the culture in the same way. And so it's, I'm sure, confusing to some people as how books don't or do make it to the top of the Americas list. But one of the things that is so crucial to this is the moon ceremony. The ancient ritual, and food. Every you turn around, there's food, and that was it. So think of other cultural things that you were, and you probably can't even think of. I mean, this is your culture, and she probably didn't, or were you aware of weaving them in for a non Latinx audience?
No, I wasn't writing for a non-Latinx audience. I was writing for my children in particular, because I wanted my children who are mixed culturally and racially to see themselves reflected. And we'd seen plenty of stories of Mexican only children, and we've seen plenty of not plenty, but some stories of Puerto Rican children, but the Latinidad that they mix that they had not been represented. So I wrote this story for them. And my son, who was 11 at the time when the book was published, he loved the story. He loved, because he's the juju, right? He's the juju in the story. And so I was certainly writing to reflect that multi-ethnic, multicultural, and multiracial experience that they live. And so in order for me to do that, I needed to honor all of these different elements that make up who they are. And again, I come back to the Bay Area, because the Bay Area is so diverse. A lot of what makes this landscape so culturally rich is all of these different immigrant communities who live here. So that you have Capoeira, the Brazilian community who's here and is very strong. And so you have Bomba, the Puerto Rican community who's here, the Mexican community who does ceremony and danza, and all of that. And then the Black community who's also, has a very strong presence in the Bay Area. And so I wanted to be able to honor, the ways that these different cultures are in conversation, just like bomba dancing. I feel like bomba dancing was the metaphor for all of it, right? Because you have this exchange with somebody who improvises and your own creation. And so I think that if we look at the book, that's what she's doing. She's having a conversation with different elements of who she is culturally.
Yeah, and the character you mentioned, Juju, the younger brother, and there are these little pieces, and you're not exposed in the poetry, the poems that you read to us, but that he has a broken heart, that literally he is like open heart surgery, and then that's just coupled right, I think before or after, I can't recall, with when she cuts up that picture, and that's just it's a wonderful juxtaposition there.
Wow, I hadn't thought about that. I really appreciate that. I hadn't really thought about that juxtaposition. But my son had tetralogy of Fallot and had open heart surgery, and again, he was,
oh my goodness,
when he was a baby, and he's very much like that character. But again, everything that happens in the story is fictionalized. But I really try to think about the ways that communities of color are afflicted, without having to be this story be about the pain of being Afro-Latinx, Mexican, Puerto Rican. And so so that's why I kind of like threw in these little things, the wound of having to be have surgery, but then also like, and then also of in Magda's case, or Marco's case, what society might view, or how our cultures have historically been so homophobic and transphobic. And I really wanted to address that. I wanted to critique our community and show our community, okay, there's another way. We don't have to, we don't have to be this hateful and wounding, but we can be, healing, and we can do it another way. And in this community, this is how one community did that.
Because there is the place at which Marco or Magda becomes Marco, and Mar nickname in the book, and his family creates a ceremony, and so that's even before. And I wonder, in a way, if that doesn't ease Sally's acceptance a bit into the possibility of an own ceremony. I don't know.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. I mean, that was the intention, because I think what ceremony does for anybody in any kind of ritual or meditative practice, it allows you to reflect. And in Sally's case, I think that she was able to reflect, and it made her transgression that much worse. It like she knew that she had been brought into the circle, and that like the sage would like tell the truth, like the truth is really important, and that her lie would not stand eventually. But she so yes, I think so.
Because the Yvonne character, we really didn't meet him too much in your poems, but when she's goes to the movies with this guy who's just totally cruel to her, that is your ultimate conflict. Just the book is so lyrical. Did you know from the outset that you were writing this in verse? Is that just because I know your new book, The Land of Crayons, is also in verse? So was that a plan from the beginning?
Yes. I allowed the voice of the character to dictate. And so the first poem that I ever wrote was the first one, My Locket. And that first line, it has been unchanged. So
Interesting.
that she came out in poetry. And I think because in some ways, Sally is also me, and I was writing this story for myself in order to heal myself, because I was raised Catholic and had no idea about moon ceremonies or any such thing. It was very strict Catholic upbringing where you didn't talk about it, where it was very shameful. And so it was only until I was an adult that I began to make these connections and talk to elders in the community who had kept these secrets and these beautiful traditions alive despite colonization, that I was able to kind of, have a consciousness about it. So, and I'm a poet, and so that just, it kind of like came out very naturally to write in this way. But one of the things that I really appreciate about poetry is that it really allows you access to the very intimate chambers of the heart. Like you can get really, really close, and you can be very playful with language, especially when you're writing for children, and you can make up words like "a mi friend del alma," like "a mi friend" is this made up word. And these are all things that I think that poetry gives us and access to, that I mean, it can be argued that prose can too, but I think more so in poetry.
Yeah, there's this one particular poem, it's called Slippery Everything, and I wish that everybody could just kind of see it. But another thing with poetry is just the line breaks and how you can play with that. Everything I think isn't. Friends that are, aren't. A boy I like isn't mine, but everyone's and no one's. And I mean, I read it accentuating those line breaks so you could see. And because they really, it's both a visual thing and a sonic thing that it was beautiful. Another criteria with the Américas Award is that a book fits in or ties in with the curriculum. And I know that you've talked to a lot of student groups in the past. Have you talked to young people about the moon within and what was their reaction? And
Mm. Sadly, I think I can count on one hand the times that I've been able to talk to children about the moon within. Most of the visits or that I've made to schools have been universities because the book has been censored quite a bit. And
that was where I was going.
yeah,
I wanted to know if
yeah,
you had that experience and what that experience has been like.
it's been a silent censoring. It hasn't been like an outright, like there hasn't been a crusade against the book, though I've had hate mail. Some pearl clutching mom who couldn't, you know, believe that that's what I was writing for children. I argue that this is precisely the time when we need to be talking about it. This is this, to have body positivity and body awareness exactly at the time when things are so dramatically changing during puberty is when we need to have these very frank and beautiful discussions about these changes, and not make them taboos to kind of like, take out the taboo. So, but to answer your question, um, the children that I have visited, I visited a health class. It was a health teacher and an English teacher collaborated, and they did beautiful presentations to
Oh,
me.
lovely.
They presented drawings, and
Oh,
they created a puberty kit where they put together like things that they think would comfort somebody who's going through puberty. And they gave them to somebody else in their community. And that was like really tremendous. And so I've had, when children read the book, they really respond. Even, I would say, even boys, like I have this my son's best friend Mario, didn't want to read the book because he felt it was like for girls, and his mother gave it to him anyway, and his mother sent me a picture of him. He was just devouring the book. And then when I talked to him, I said, Mario, so what do you think about the book? And he was like, Aida, I don't think I was supposed to read that book. And I was like, why? He's like, there's just so much private stuff in it. And I said, but yeah, of course you are, Mario. Like, how are we going to bring down the patriarchy if you don't, if you can't be an ally to your menstruating friends and your mom and your siblings and me, like, come on. He was like, yeah, I guess so. He was
yeah.
11, so.
I was going to say it had to be, tween or preteen, that's for sure. Well, I would like to open the questions. I think we have about 15 minutes left. Is that correct? And I'd like to open up questions from our group to see. I have not been keeping up with the chat at all. I don't see anything yet. So those of you out there, fellow committee members, Colleen, anybody else, whether you've read the book or not, just please chime in with questions. I will have more if you do not, but
I have I also feel like I didn't fully answer your question about censorship, if I may. So the book, I went to this conference. It was a bilingual educators conference, and I was doing a roundtable. And I'm sure you're all familiar with these roundtables where the author sits in a table, and then the audience comes. And so it was a group of like 5 educators at my first session, and I pitched my book. And the first person to respond says, it sounds like a very lovely book, but just the word gender fluid would keep it out of my school district. And I was like, really? And then another person said, yeah, and you know what, like, unfortunately, menstruation is not something that's for everyone. And they went like this, throughout. And I was like, wow, how interesting. It was like such a rude awakening. Okay, so like our 15 minutes were up, and then the next batch of people came in, and I pitched my book, and then I intentionally asked, what do you think? Could you teach this book in your classroom? And they're like, no, we'd probably have to send note home and separate the genders, and it'd be like really, really hard. But we could have it in the classroom library. And another person said, you know what, teachers are too bogged down, too with their own workload to try and champion a controversial book. And I appreciated their answers, but that was the same answer at every session. I had
Every
5
session.
sessions. Yeah.
Mhm.
And so I understand, and I feel for educators, but again, I feel like there's ways, like these educators who really discuss puberty in a very honest way and a constructive way.
It's a book that's out there in the world and is important. And I think even for teachers who do feel that way, librarians need it in the book, and they can hand sell that book to the kids who want it and need it, for sure. See a question down there.
Are you reading them to me, or should I open the chat?
Yeah, Angela, do you want to chime in? And she says teachers are never too busy to recommend booklet books. It's the best part of the job. Oh, good for you, Angela. What do you teach?
Yeah.
Right now I'm teaching college, but I am teaching writing for elementary teachers. So I'm teaching the students who are getting ready to student teach K through 8, either the
Great.
fall or next spring.
Great.
So I pass along a lot of book recommendations.
Good.
That's fabulous. Hopefully mine will be one.
Yeah, well, because in terms of curriculum, I'm glad that you mentioned the experience that you did have with those 2 teachers, because if nothing else, I think the teachers they teach sex education, and it's so embarrassing, and all the kids are embarrassed by it. And this book would just be, because it comes with all the other stuff that I mentioned, all the just being a teenager or being on the edge of being a teenager. And, they're as interested in, oh, mom took away my, iPad or whatever, as the other stuff. And it's the dancing and this capoeira, and it's all this. So I think that you would suddenly be able to just make that whole sex education thing so much easier. So that would be a great entree. So anybody who's, go ahead and
Actually,
push that.
gay and lesbian and LGBTQIA plus alliance at school, at a elementary school, read it as a book club.
Great.
And so I think those are also ways, because I
Mhm.
see somebody suggested book club.
Okay, Colleen, go ahead.
My question switches gears, so I'll hang on just a second. I did want to say thank you so much for going back and clarifying some more on what you called censorship, but your experience talking with these educators at your conference. And I think then it's even more important that book awards like the Américas Award do recognize books like yours that, like you said, are really breaking ground in a lot of ways in this area. So thank you for explaining that more fully, because I think all of us found that really helpful and interesting to get the background on that. So my question switches gears. From the very, very beginning of your book, it felt like an 11-year-old, almost 12-year-old was writing it. Your voice is so authentic. And I just wondered if you could share a little bit about how you get in the headspace, how you make that transition from grown adult woman to really speaking such an authentic voice for a prepubescent girl.
Well, I think I was just eavesdropping a lot with my children. I think that's it. But no, well, yeah, I think that has a lot to do with it. And but I also made sure that after it was written, I went back and then made sure that vocabulary was within the age range that I was intending. So middle school, I really wrote it for 11 to 13-year-olds. And though, children as young as 10 and 9 years old menstruate, so I had to also temper that a little bit, but it's a little more, I think, sophisticated than a 9-year-old or a 10-year-old would find. And so yeah, so I did that kind of work on it as well. But it's a big deal. I learned from one of my teachers, fiction teachers, who Linda Sue Park, who said that voice is word choice, punctuation, and rhythm. And so, one like somebody in the north versus somebody in the south will use different words and punctuate it differently. And so I really had to think about that, and I tried to be really honest. But so thank you.
Linda Sue Park, she's so amazing, isn't she? One of the things I love what she talks about is that there's the internal story, the internal conflict, and the external conflict. So what's the book about, and what's the book really about?
Yeah,
And
that's
that is a question that I'd like. Do I have anything else down here? That is a question that I'd like to ask about your new work, because I do want to have an opportunity before we close for you to talk about the Land of Cranes,
yeah.
and
you.
and your new book coming out too.
Yeah, well, I've got a few things coming. I have here, it is, yes, Land of the Cranes, there it is. Yeah, it is also a novel in verse, but it's such a different book than The Moon Within. The Moon Within is, to me, it's angsty and fun, and I was able to put in jokes and rats and slime and fun things, and Land of the Cranes is really cutting at a very difficult situation in the United States, a human tragedy that is happening in real time on the US-Mexico border. And that's the detention of children on our land, on here in the United States. And so it's a very different book, and it spends a lot of time investigating that tragedy, and through a much younger child's voice. And so, to your question, Colleen, about how I did that, again, I looked only for fourth grade vocabulary and made sure that I didn't go beyond that, because I really wanted to make sure that a 9-year-old would understand how terrible these human rights violations that are happening are in right now. So it's a different book, but I'm very proud of it. It won a Charlotte Huck Honor Award, and just at NCTE recently.
Congratulations.
Thank you. It's very exciting, and it got on a bunch of the best of the year lists, and it won a Nerdy Book Award, and it's a finalist for the Sybil Awards and the Jane Addams Pierce Award. So it's like it's doing pretty well, and I'm very excited about it.
And it's also heartbreaking. And when she says at the end, you write, "Dear reader, thank you for your courage to bear witness to Betita's difficult story." And I love that.
Yeah.
I've got a note here from Lou. Lou, you want to come in and pipe up and ask your question?
Sure. Thanks again for doing this session and sharing. I'm just curious. I appreciate your candor about the blowback or pushback that you experienced initially, and I'm just curious about what the editing process was like. What kind of feedback you got from either an editor or editors, or or do you turn to people for supportive feedback with your writing, and just kind of what that was like, and if there was a difference, or to talk us through a little bit of that.
Well, I was kind of a lone wolf, and in writing the story, I wrote the story by myself without very much feedback. I consulted my elders for the spiritual relevance or accuracy. But when it sold, not very many people had read it, maybe 2 people. And I think that because a straight white man edited and acquired the book, that's the reason why the book was published. I really believe that if it had been anybody else, it wouldn't have had a chance, because it's that taboo. It ruffles that many feathers. And so I'm very grateful to Nick Thomas, who was able to champion this book in that way. I mean, he really had to kick down a door for this book to be published, because again, you know, we're talking vulvas and sexual arousal for the first time in children's literature, and you're like, well, you know, maybe that's not something we want to show, especially scholastic. And I think that took a lot of courage on their part, but I'm glad they did. And we only edited about 3 times, but I would say that the book did have 5 accuracy readers. So we had a two-spirit person, a trans, and 2 trans men read for accuracy for the gender fluid character, and then 2 experts in one in Chicana spirituality and one in mythology.
Now, did Nick get those readers for you, or did you find them?
We
or-
worked together to do them. Yeah, because I knew David Bowles, actually. David Bowles, who you might know. He was one of the readers, and Dr. Lara Medina was another. And you know, and then I also had a native reader. So maybe 6 readers. Yeah.
That's great.
But they all had very small edits. It wasn't, didn't have to rewrite too much of it. But I have to tell you also a little bit about the controversy. You know, the New York Times reviewed the book and called it important, but then I think the writer took exception to the comparison to Judy Blume and didn't, you know, review the book for its own worth, you know. And they said that my book had not gone far enough, like, because I didn't write about Marco's menstruation. But you know what the reviewer failed to realize is that that's not my story to tell. That was not my story to tell. And I stopped, you know, I could tell a story about what it's like to be an ally to a gender fluid person or a gender expansive person, but that's about it. Because I couldn't do it, you know, ethically or nor authentically in a way that made me feel good. So.
But you also set the stage for that, and it was Marco was not developing yet.
Yeah.
That was that was set there. So what an odd
Yeah.
criticism. I'm sorry.
I know. I wanted to respond, but it was like, you can't respond.
Yeah.
I was like, ooh. I don't know if that answers your question, Lou.
Okay. I'm sure, Colleen, did you have other questions? Yeah, you said questions at the beginning, so I thought
I
you might
did.
have.
Well, I do have some more. I was going to let other people go if they wanted to, but I will always
I don't
ask.
see anything here in the chat.
So I always like to hear from authors what was one of the most surprising parts of the writing process for the book, or maybe going through the editing process, or even, like you said, what a strange year it's been since it came out, in terms of promotion and everything that follows the publishing of the book. So anything kind of that you didn't anticipate besides COVID, probably, but anything that was surprising through it.
Well, yeah, I was very excited to take the book to Paris for the Gloria and Saldua conference that was happening, and we couldn't do that.
Didn't happen.
Not to Paris, I'm sorry, to Spain. We took it to Paris, but we didn't take it to Spain. And so I was like, oh, because I'm very influenced by Gloria and Saldua's teachings. And so, you know, I feel like this is one manifestation or one expression of her theories and of decolonizing and healing from colonization. And so that was that. In terms of surprises, well, yeah, of course, it was, the biggest surprise was that, you know, we hadn't had a story about menstruation since Judy Blume's Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. And that was written in 1971. You know, that's nearly 50 years after Margaret came out that my book came out. And and it made me really, really sad to think that not only had Latinx children never had a story like this, but that children of all genders and ethnicities and races had not had our beautiful menstruations depicted on the page at a time when it's so incredibly life altering. So that was the biggest surprise.
Mm.
And honor, I think, in some ways, because I was like, let's break down the doors. And so now luckily I was able to pitch an anthology, and it's coming. It's right now. It's tentatively titled "Calling the Moon," and it's an anthology of middle grade stories about menstruations by writers of color.
Beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
And when would that be likely to come out?
It's coming in 2022, next year.
Okay.
Yeah,
great.
and we've got like an incredible selection of people: Erin Entrada Kelly, Ibi Zaboy, Nikki Grimes, Jamila Said Mendez is my co-editor, and so yeah, it's a big great group of people.
So you've edited it already, or you're in the process of?
Yeah, it's done. Yeah. Oh, there it is.
Okay. Look at you. Great. Thanks, Angela.
Thank you. And oh, actually, to answer your story, so like I'm working on the next your other question. I'm working on a historical fiction novel for the first time. It's called A Seat in the Sun, and it takes place during the pivotal moments of the UFW Great Boycott Strike in 1965. And it's about a little girl who dreams to be a ringmaster, and she's inspired by Dolores Huerta, and she wants to join the El Teatro Campesino, which is like the political theater that came out of the farm worker strike. And I've got 2 picture books coming, one this year called In the Spirit of a Dream, and it's a collaboration between Alina Chow, who's the anthologist, and I wrote poems about 13 authors, 13 immigrants of color to the United States, and there's 13 different illustrators, one for each immigrant, and I wrote poems for each person. So I'm excited about that. And then I've actually been translating. I translated 2 picture books and to Spanish, and then one novel in verse to English. So I've been busy.
And Jovenita?
Oh, and Jovita Wore Pants. Jovita Wore Pants, a story of a revolutionary fighter, which is based on my distant great tia, Jovita Valdovinos, who fought for religious freedom, dressed as a man in Mexico, in the highlands of the Sierra de Morones in Mexico.
Well, it sounds like this pandemic has not shut you down at all.
No. It's been great because I can sit in this little cave and write. So.
Yeah. What is your writing day like?
I usually get the kids off to school, and then I come down in front of their computers, and then I come down here and I write till dinner time. So yeah, and then I run up and make dinner, and then sometimes depending on how passionate I am about the story, then I'll just continue working until the evening. Yeah, I don't spend a lot of time watching television, and that I think helps.
But now, of course, you'll have a lot of research for the historical fiction. So. Yeah,
I've been doing lots of research. Yeah, I've been trying to get an interview with Dolores Huerta, but she's been very busy. She's a 90, I think she's 90 years old right now, and she was very involved in getting out the vote for the election, and so yeah, I haven't been able to nail her down yet, but that's on my wish list.
That's on your goal. That's your wish list.
Yes.
Okay. It's probably after 7, so thank you everybody for staying with us.
Yeah.
Do we have any final questions? Anybody?
It looks like Molly, are you trying to ask a question? Also, I just wanted, I see some people joining us. It looks like there may have been we have recorded this, but it seems like maybe people didn't catch that it was 6 o'clock Central and 7 Eastern. So if you are just now joining us, we are finishing up, but we can send you the recording. So sorry that you're joining
Aw.
us. Yeah. Molly, did you have a question?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I took out my Bluetooth speaker. I just wanted to say hi. I'm so sorry we're not able to get together in person right now. Aida, I'm with the Center for Latin American Studies at Stanford University.
Oh,
I do our educational outreach here. So I just wanted to say hello. This has been so fun and so interesting. And hopefully once we can get together in person, we can maybe do something with local teachers.
oh, that would be wonderful. You're just across the bay from me.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for coming. That'd be wonderful.
And do you do Zoom visits? Because if we have any other like K-12 teachers here, they might be interested in sharing that information with or librarians sharing that information.
Yes, absolutely. I have, again, I don't get asked very often, but sure. I've been doing, Zoom visits for Land of the Cranes. I've done plenty of those, which is really interesting how menstruation is a taboo to talk about in school, but something as barbaric as, the detention of children, incarceration and criminalization of migrants in the way that we've seen in the United States is not. So it's fascinating. Some social scientist has to explain that to me, or psychiatrist has to explain that to
Kind
me.
of frightening, especially to a Californian, right?
Mhm, yeah.
Okay. Anybody else? Last minute questions. Is there anything that you have wanted to share that I haven't asked or anybody else has not posed? Any last minute thoughts that you have?
Well, I always, when I talk to educators, I always encourage you to be brave for your students.
Mm.
That books like mine really require you to be brave, because I just based on that conversation that I have with some of those teachers, that they're not willing to take a stand for controversial books. But I think that with books like this that are so different and so unique and offered just a different perspective, or a perspective on something that we are not even talking about, is part of wellness for your students and wellness for community. And so I ask that you be brave and to take it, take the book to heart and think of your students as people first.
We're getting a lot of chats, wonderful comments. Wonderful this has been, and indeed it has been. So thank you, Aida. This has just been a lovely opportunity, an honor for me and a privilege and I will echo the fact that I certainly hope that it can be sometime soon in person.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Aida. Thanks, everyone.
Okay, take care, everyone. Bye. Stay
Take care.
safe.
Thanks, and thank you everybody for coming. We really, really appreciated your having you here.